Hey guys, in this tutorial we're going to be applying what we learned in the two previous videos going over HTML and CSS and actually applying what we learned into making a end website, or in some people's cases their first website. On the right here we'll notice that we have our plain text, but once we actually apply all of our CSS we'll get this output here, which I think is a cool looking website that emulates sort of like a HackerNet terminal. We can have, the last logged in date and just a few prompts that I think looks really neat. So taking a step back and looking at our code, what I have here is just a simple HTML markup. We have the name of the website. We have a link to the style sheet, which we will be putting all of our styles in. And just simply a h1 header for the name of the website, a container for the actual terminal that will be centered into the screen, and just the various text that we will be displaying to the user, which is these paragraphs here, all these lines. Now you'll see that we actually have two new element types, a div and a span. What these are more container type classes. Anything that's in between the opening and closing div or opening and closing span tags, all the styles that we apply within the div or the span will apply to any of the elements or text that's stored in between them. So in our case, when we have our div container, if we apply positioning to the div, all these elements are actually contained within it. So as we position the div container class, it will actually move the content with it. The span tag is more for inline styling. We use this if we wish to change a single word or phrase within a greater or larger data set, such as a paragraph tag. So if we look over here in the style sheet, all I've done is just simply typed out the various elements that we'll be changing, the classes, and the single ID of the header. So to begin with, let's go ahead and apply a background color and a color for all the text for the body. So we'll go ahead and refresh it. And now we have a black background for a website and all the text is now white. Now if we take a look at the terminal, we want to move all of this text to the center. So all I do is just simply take what we've written out here. Let's change this to a color red, and you'll see why in just a moment. Now what we have here is the attribute types of height and width. What this does is for 50% width, we want the container that we have it all in to be 50% of the screen size. So here, the width of the container, which is the red, which represents the div, will be 50% of the screen's width. Same thing goes for the height. 50% of the container will be 50% of the screen size. We have padding for the element, so the content is held within itself. We have the positioning of top 30. What we're saying is we wish this container to be down 30% from the top of the container, and we want to be left 25%. The reason why we choose these specific values is we wish the container to sit centrally on the screen. So by having a width of 50%, that means we have 25 on the left and 25 on the right. So to make this centered, we just simply tell it to be left 25%. We introduce the border attribute, which is this green right here. It's just 1 pixel solid green. And now that we actually have our terminal centered, we no longer need to actually see the terminal color itself. So now we have the text centered in the page. Next, we want to go ahead and take care of this header right here. So all we have to do is take the text align center and the margin top. And we'll go ahead and apply that so that that's centered in the screen. What the margin top 50 does is it pushes the content down 50 pixels. So we're saying that we have a buffer of 50 pixels from the top of the text to the top of the page. And then we align it centrally so that instead of it being to the left, it will actually be aligned centered. We can actually change that to the right if we wish it to be right, but go ahead and change that back to center. So now we're getting close to what we want to have. The last piece will actually be changing the anonymous cloud terminal line to say yes, but blinking red. So we do that by applying a CSS animation. Now this is a bit more complex, so I won't want to go into too much details just for keeping the video brief. But if we go ahead and apply that, the animation class simply says we wish to apply the animation of blinker, which we've defined here. It will take 1 second to happen, so it will flash in and out within 1 second. The linear attribute basically just says from the time that it appears or disappears that fading in or fading out should be the same time, so half a second each. And by saying infinite, we want this to perpetually loop for the entire time the page is displayed. We'll go ahead and change the text color to red so that the yes will flash in a red color as opposed to white. And the keyframes blinker defines what action we want to take when this animation is halfway through. So when it's at 50% or 0.5 seconds, we're going to go ahead and set the opacity or how clear the text is to 0. So as we apply that, we now have our blinking yes. Now, as we define the width and the height and the positioning to be percentage of the screen size, as we resize our window, the actual elements will be redisplayed with it. So still, the width of the terminal is 50%, the height is 50%, and it's still positioned 35% down and 25% to the left. But as we defined a fixed height of 50 for being top of the header, the title is still fixed at the same height, no matter how we resize the window. I hope this is a good example of how, when we take our HTML code, how drastically CSS can change the looks of our website. In future tutorials, I hope to go into more advanced topics, more CSS features, more advanced HTML elements, but this is supposed to serve as just a simple introductory course to getting you into thinking about HTML and CSS as code and how it's basically fundamental building blocks to making modern websites that we use today. If you have any questions about what I've introduced in this video, feel free to send me a message or leave a comment in the section below, and I'll try to get back to you as best as I can.